Ah, yes, commentary on the Chosen One trope. A lot of times, I think people use Chosen One as like a crutch where they think like Chosen One equals not only will they not have a dynamic arc, but the writer will turn them into a Mary Stu, Marty Sue, whatever, someone that has no flaws and it meets no challenges, that sort of thing. But I think the Chosen One trope can be used really well. Uh, Even if I have to use some more famous IPs to do it, one can do it. The most obvious example is the Luke Skywalker kind of setup where the Chosen One is hidden far away from his family, or in certain family situations where it's like, oh dear, the father is evil, extremely evil. But even chosen ones can end up getting into trouble. And the destiny part, well, sometimes the destiny part is whether or not the chosen one decides to take up the cause. And that cause can be something as simple as just defending innocent people, from the injustice of the world. Honestly, I think it just comes down to where nowadays the popular trend is like, oh, chosen ones aren't nuanced enough, or gritty enough, or something like that. Like when you think of chosen ones, you're thinking of like She-Ra or He-Man or Luke Skywalker as somebody who is entrusted with a mantle to like carry on a legacy, bring back the Jedi, defend Grayskull, that sort of thing. Who am I? Okay, as for the divinity aspect, like a divine mandate, a lot of chosen ones, especially in older style stories, they were mandated by God to defeat some sort of evil. And since that has an overall Christian overtone, a lot of the postmodern writers are like, no, I don't want this in my story. God doesn't control my actions. Whether it's overt or more subtle. Um, yeah, there's a reason why some people don't want to deal with that aspect of a chosen one, because they don't want a god or the god. Whether it's the Christian god or a made up spaghetti monster god for your setting. Uh, they don't want to feel like, yes, it's this omnipotent or omniscient entity controlling this hero's actions, and they don't have the free will to choose. Which, ironically, I give my characters a fair amount of free will to choose. The bad guys choose to be evil, the good guys choose to be good. Because overall, in the end, they'll reap their rewards in the end. The bad guys are not going to like their rewards. Nope. But they're going to be just desserts. Ooh, my. Okay, and some chosen ones say, like Paul Atreides, ends up fighting his destiny at, especially you'll see this more in Dune Messiah. They're usually, again, given some sort of mandate, or they'll have some sort of quirk where it's like part of the story will revolve around a particular quirk or element. Like in Paul Atreides' case, he is the Kwisatz Haderach, so he can see beyond certain points of time and space. But overall, it's going to be his son Leto the Second that ends up fulfilling Paul's mandate, as the chosen one. But kind of like this cover I found for the video, in order for a chosen one not to be misconstrued with like a Mary Sue, Marty Stew, whatever, you have to give them their own motivations beyond their mandate. Like even though Paul was trying to escape his own destiny, he was still trying to make choices that either helped or hindered him within that particular frame. There's a lot of successful chosen ones. It's just that nowadays, with so many people wanting to deconstruct everything. And here's like an important element. Mr. Herbert actually knows how to reconstruct what he's deconstructing. Like he did deconstruct the hero's journey in from Dune to Dune Messiah, and then to Children of Dune, the other aspect of the hero's journey was given to his children. Like they had to help reshape or get ready to reshape humanity, and you see how that plays out in God Emperor Dune and the last two books of that series, which get really, really trippy, not gonna lie. But in order to break something, you have to also know how to reconstruct it. And even the same goes for Chosen Ones. Another popular example of a Chosen One is Aang from, the Airbender show. Yes, he does have an unusual ability because he's like one of the last Airbenders, so that automatically puts him on the map. Besides being the Avatar, and the thing is, yeah, with the Avatar and everything, yeah, he had to learn some of his other skills. Me personally, in my book, since I don't want to go through a whole lot of long, drawn-out training montages, a lot of superhero prose settings have like a superhero school where they all learn how to use their powers and do the correct thing with them. Me, I was more interested in my guys actually reaching a certain level of skill, and then go out and do their adventures, and then I can do time skips to have them learn more skills, so when they ultimately face all the bigger bad guys, they'll have the skill set already trained in the background. It's like that's just my personal preference on training montages. I don't have to see them on the page really to know that the character did get trained up. You can do really quick aside. I think it's part of it is because so many military sci-fi books have like, here's the basic training scenario. Instead of where I think Harrington did this better, where they have Honor straight out of her academy days, and she has to deal with a massive avalanche, for snow and everything else, all that debris on Griffin, I think it was, or Gryphon, however you say it. It's been a while, but they showcased her skills, even though it was early in her career, to help show how she could get people out of trouble even when she's just a mere like cadet or trainee, it just newly minted into an ensign, that sort of thing. So it's not really showcasing her overall, this is the military training. No, they're showcasing the results of those training. So I think that's what some people want to see even with Chosen Ones. They want to be able to see like the results of said training. But a lot of people do go overboard with that, so that way their character isn't accused of being a Mary Sue. Da 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 da. I mean, that's also with my characters. I try to give everybody like something that they're really good at, so that way they kind of fit together as a team. Even similar with the Avatar setup. You had Sokka, who could plan very well. You had his sister with her water bending abilities, so she became a trainer for Aang. You had Aang with his spontaneous nature, like he was very energetic, enthusiastic. He had to be reformed into someone that could take on the main bad guy eventually. But, you could just see that with a lot of the characters. And people prefer the dynamic arc characters. Half the time, they think Chosen Ones can't change because they're destined by mandate to win. It's like, yes, they are. But you can still make it interesting in, like, how do they go about winning? It's all about what a reader versus what the writer wants. You will have some overlap. Sometimes you won't. It just depends on a lot of personal preferences. And a whole lot of personal preferences nowadays is the reader wants a dynamic arc. They don't want, flat arc. Because a lot of people are so assumed, or like they're so wrapped around the axle of, if I do this, this, and that, I can avoid being called a Mary Sue or Marty Stew. It's like people are going to still call Superman types that, even though they're paragons, or aspirational flat arc. It's just going to happen, regardless of what you do. You can mitigate some of the criticisms, but you won't be able to mitigate all criticisms. So what you have to do with chosen ones is you have to give their enemies some divine kind of powers too, something that they're really skilled at. So that way you can have a back and forth between the chosen one versus his arch nemesis. Ultimately, even to take Upland Protocol into account, the overall narrative is the Oversoul made a mistake in the initial creation of the world because, the highest was up to the task of fulfilling his mandate, his chosen mandate, but his brother was not. And that influence came from what you see with Dark Side versus the High Father, but in my case, I did a more Christian bent where it's kind of like, oh, it's like the devil versus God, or the devil versus Jesus kind of thing, but not a literal one for one. It's just that's where the influences came from. But when you look at this thing I'm using as like a title page, yes, you can give them flaws, you can give them doubts, you can give them fears, but don't go super overboard with it to the point where you cripple them to be able to act. A lot of times people are so consumed by, I gotta make sure they're flawed and fucked up enough to where people can relate to them, to the point where it stalls the character. Like, yeah, give them like one or two really big doubts, but give them like three or four bigger motivations to that way they can overcome their doubts. That way you can have more of a natural progression if that's what you wish. Like, for say instance, Aang didn't really go top notch with his firebending abilities, and in fact he hurt Katara the first time he used them, and that made him reluctant to use the firebending powers until he got Zuko to help train him. That way you can add some activity into the side cast, helping the main character overcome certain things. That is pretty important. But again, also the reason why people happen to go for more dynamic arcs, because they think it's easier to implement that in versus the flat arc. But you could see example of a flat arc chosen one doing quite well. Yes, Dragon Ball Z. He bounces off his dynamic cast. They help him out. He doesn't always win every battle, but he'll come back stronger with from every defeat. But not all defeats have to be physical or mental ones. Some of them could just be like setbacks until the hero can figure out how to overcome them. Because a lot of stories nowadays, what I mean by that, it's like they have the hero lose life and limb or something so torn from them that they can't find any way to replace it. It's like a pyrrhic victory or pyrrhic victory. I'm probably saying that wrong again, but eh. But so to have the hero lose so much to where the ending is like ash in your mouth. A good example of an ending like that is the Mass Effect 3 travesty. It's ash in your mouth because you don't manage to get an ending where Shepard can possibly reunite with his crew or her crew, depending on who you picked. But and even Shepard themselves was given kind of like a chosen one status, because in most books, most games, most comics, you are going to be following a chosen one of a particular output. You could have a street level chosen one, which is kind of like most of Batman's family, to use another well-known IP, or you could have cosmic level chosen ones, which is more of Superman's side of the house. It just depends on the flavor and the how can you say, like, the intensity of it. A lot of people don't really like doing chosen ones as much because they think they're going to get pigeonholed into like, oh, I have to do this, this, or that. It's like, no, just take a good example is to just take what you've liked from other stories, and you can mishmash that structure into your story. You don't have to put everything one for one. but you can take influences and build up your own personal preferences in a story, character arcs, setting, whatnot. You just gotta keep reading what you like, and then you can incorporate other things later. A lot of times, I'll even use friends' works, like both the Star Warden books. I'll link those below. But a lot of times, chosen ones aren't always challenged physically or mentally. They're challenged morally. What will the hero be willing to do to outwit the villain or bypass the villain? And a lot of stories nowadays will have the hero sink to the villain's level because they rather have a vigilante. Even a vigilante can be a chosen one of sorts, but they'll have that vigilante sink to the level of the villain and thus proving the villain correct in some way. Yeah, that's another very popular element that I've seen put into books nowadays or movies, shows. It's the reason why I don't watch a lot of modern stuff because it's not giving me what I want, even in the chosen one department. Oh, but yeah, like even with the balance between the villain and the hero, you have to balance out their skills. Like, again, give each of them a skill that can defeat the other, but then you have to put the pieces on the chessboard to where, okay, if the villain makes this kind of shot at you, the hero will respond with this kind of either deflection, or they'll go like mano a mano. A lot of times in a lot of stories, eventually it'll get to that part in the arc where, yes, the hero confronts the main villain directly. And that'll even happen in my story, too. Everything's building up to that, because you'll see all the lieutenants being taken down before we get to the big bad. Yay! But, yeah, like a lot of chosen ones, you have to give them chosen villains, where their mandate is to cause as much trouble as possible. And part of it is a lot of people want to give all their characters all these complex motivations when in reality you could start off simple. Kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. You could add all the other elements later, but the overall main element can be something as simple as good versus evil. That's perfectly fine, everyone. You can start off with that main conflict and grow things from there. And yes, even chosen ones end up in that whole rigmarole, as they say. They mostly can be chosen because of their personality or their power set, or it could be a bloodline. There's a lot of different elements you can put into chosen ones. They could get a magical sword. They could have a magical companion. You could also balance out the chosen ones, like, oh, they have to earn this. Okay, have them earn some skills, but you can also have some other skills, like, say, with superheroes, where those powers or skills are inherent to who they are. Sure, they might need some training to shore up the wisdom and ability to use it, but you often see with superheroes, even like Captain Marvel, and yes, I mean the old DC version, where once he becomes uses the power word Shazam, he gains the knowledge of those various entities that come along with that mantle. So it's to help that little kid have like a subset of skills to call upon, but it doesn't mean he'll use the skills properly all the time. He has to gain experience for that. So you could, again, just take stuff from what you enjoy. That's all I can really keep saying with anything that people do with tropes or themes or various narrative arcs they enjoy. See how other people have incorporated stuff, and then take from that and put it into your own work to where you can put it to a one. Wait, Red31 Sorceress, rather. Yes, I hope some of this does help answer some questions. I genuinely do want to try to make, chosen ones more palatable to people, and all sorts of things that have fallen out of favor in this postmodern era of deconstruction. Please, for the love of God, learn how to reconstruct, and have a good day, everybody.